This is Jessica Salmonson's third video journal, Antipsychotics. The first thing that I found interesting was the differences between functional versus organic psychoses. And basically, the book described that functional psychoses were physiological, while organic were biological in nature. I also thought it was interesting the breakdown with delusions being bizarre versus not bizarre. This is kind of a difficult concept for me. It was pretty easy when the delusions are bizarre, but I do have a client with depression, and I just have a gut feeling that they're delusions, but they're plausible, and it's the number of delusions that he's having that make me kind of question how accurate his thought processes are. And so I found that very, very interesting, and it's still kind of a difficult subject. It's hard to draw that line. I thought that the information on D2 receptors was extremely confusing. I would need to read that a couple more times before I figured that out. I found the dopamine model the most plausible. It was the model that I gravitated to. The book stated that excessive dopamine can lead to a failure to screen stimuli, and I thought that was very interesting in schizophrenia. Just 2 days ago at the clubhouse, Sandy brought out some Oreo cookies, and one of our schizophrenic clients, he's newly on meds, and he took the Oreo cookie, he split it open, and he stared at it for about 3 minutes before somebody broke the silence. And I really, really wanted to ask him what he saw when he looked at that Oreo cookie. But unfortunately there was a group, so I didn't want to embarrass him. But I think it would be fascinating to ask him. I found it interesting that schizophrenia without treatment, there's a 70% relapse rate, while only a 30 to 40% relapse rate with treatment. But it caused me to ask what they define as a relapse. And maybe it's the population that we work with, but all of our clients are on medication. They almost all, still have the voices and hallucinations, etc. Do they consider that a relapse, or is a relapse simply going back into the hospital? I think that would be very interesting to see where they draw that line. I haven't met too many schizophrenics who claim to be completely cured. I found it interesting that psychotic episodes can cause brain damage. It never occurred to me that it would be irreversible. I also found it interesting that antipsychotics lower the seizure threshold, and they can also cause issues with temperature control in the body and actually cause hypothermia. That's not a side effect that they usually talk about. It also increases prolactin levels. Again, not a side effect typically discussed. I found it interesting that clozapine can cause hepatitis. And we all know that antipsychotics cause weight gain, but I didn't understand why. Found that very interesting that it alters carbohydrate metabolism, much like diabetes, and I think that explains a lot of the actions of some of the people we see in the clubhouse. They definitely act somewhat diabetic. I'm still a little confused on the positive and negative symptoms, probably just something that I need to study a bit more. But I found it interesting that the first generation antipsychotics target positive symptoms, while the second generation antipsychotics target negative symptoms. And I think that really explains why members of the clubhouse, they love to list out their medications, and why some of them would be on first generation versus second generation. I find it interesting that second generation doesn't necessarily mean that it's a better drug. That's a very interesting section. I find schizophrenia fascinating and also very, very confusing. Definitely a topic to be studied more.